interesting thing that keeps popping up in the Batman shows I find so interesting is they keep talking about fame and the price of fame. And I find that very fascinating. I'd be lying if I said I didn't see a little bit of that as well. Not that I'm like a huge star, I'm not like, whatever, Jim Carrey or something like that, but I mean, you see more and more sort of what you have to, I don't want to say put up with, because for me it's really not that bad yet, but there is a lot of responsibility you have to take to it, and if you're not ready for it, it catches up, and it can really hurt you, so, you know, and I think that's always the thing with these characters, is that they're not ready for it. They want the fame, but they don't want to handle the responsibility that comes with it.
It still feels like yesterday that I was making a video about the anniversary of Doug Walker's stupid show, and got blacklisted by his fans over it. By far the most common defense that I've gotten for that, and the show as a whole, is that the Nostalgia Critic is a comedy, and that everything it does should be taken as a joke. No, Doug Walker does not get that excuse. Whether it's getting information wrong while acting misogynistic like in Sailor Moon, talking down to people who've been pointing out legitimate problems in his later videos like in Christmas with the Cranks, capitalizing on fan requests to distract people from the change the channel situation like the Emoji Movie, Boss Baby, and Angry Bird, or cashing in on a popular movie currently in theaters in a cheap scumbag move to gain views, while distracting people from the change the channel situation, like the shit show we're gonna talk about today. No, you cannot say that comedy is subjective and just use that as a crutch to defend Doug Walker from criticism. If everything that Doug Walker does as the Nostalgia Critic is just a joke, then this one is a clip of him deliberately using the N-word for the sake of a cheap gag.
What's up, my niggas?
If that's supposed to be a joke, then we all owe PewDiePie an apology. As far as I can tell, there's at least two ways that you can look at a modern Nostalgia Critic episode. And whichever perspective you use, it pretty much proves to be a waste of time for everyone involved. Let's take his review of Deadpool 2, for example. If you're looking at this as a comedy, then it's basically 21 minutes of cringy, juvenile, unwitty nonsense. If you're looking at this as a review of the film, then it is far, far worse. A lot of people have defended Doug by saying that the Nostalgia Critic shouldn't be taken seriously because he's an exaggerated character. They say he's a satirical take on angry, negative, nitpicky reviewers, and that he's supposed to be a pathetic man-child. And that he's supposed to have a forced, screeching, ear-raping voice, and that you're wrong for pointing out how he's a horrible piece of entertainment. But in almost every other video he puts out, he goes on and on and on about how he wants what he's saying to be taken seriously. The only exceptions are, what? The episodes where he focuses on shitty jokes, sketches, and references as opposed to actually reviewing the movie? And if you want to defend those by saying that it's comedy, well, no, just no, they're fucking awful. And his Deadpool 2 episode is just the perfect example of what I'm talking about. We start with the usual opening when we're immediately introduced to one of the episode's biggest problems.
Yeah, I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I'm Deadpool, I love chimichangas, I'm Deadpool.
And as you probably figured out, that means we have to put up with asshole cosplay Deadpool. That guy at every convention who thinks he's really funny because he has a Deadpool cosplay, but he's really just an annoying dick.
I'm Deadpool.
I know it's hard to notice at first glance, but the problem here is that Doug Walker is being a complete hypocrite here, taking advantage of a gimmick that he openly mocked in a previous episode. In the Green Lantern episode, he was basically doing this stupid commentary on Deadpool cosplay. I guess because Ryan Reynolds was the main character in that movie. He talks about how they think they're all cool and whatnot, basically saying that just because you're dressed as Deadpool doesn't mean that you can be intentionally annoying. And wouldn't you know it, he ends up trying to emulate that in the episode. Throughout the review, he's having this actor imitating Deadpool's gimmick, trying to use it to his advantage. He tries to write a whole bunch of fourth wall breaking and self-awareness jokes as if it automatically makes them funny. And each and every one just falls flat on its face. I know when it comes to these clipless episodes, they have to resort to using cheap costumes and copying scenes from the movie. I mean, they can't use footage from the movie because it's currently in theaters, despite that Suicide Squad was out on on Blu-ray and DVD when that episode came out, so there was literally no point in making that a clipless episode, but it's done in the most obnoxious and pretentious ways. The self-mockery and self-awareness jokes are just a single gimmick that they constantly run into the ground throughout the episode. Did you think it was funny the first time? No? Well, get used to it because there's about 27 more of these damn things. I know that it's a parody of Deadpool, but the reason that it works in the Deadpool movies and not these shitty sketches is because the self-awareness and self-mockery jokes are exclusive to Deadpool himself. In the movies, he's the only one who ever uses this type of humor, and it's organic to his character because of his personality and background. But here, every single character other than Deadpool is using them, so they don't even feel unique. They're not creative enough because every single character is just exploiting the gimmick at every single opportunity. Also, the Deadpool movies knew that the fourth wall breaking jokes are irregular in superhero movies. It's more scarce in the genre, and they're not always trying to directly address the audience with them. It draws less outside attention to their universe, allowing them to be more creative in their execution. We've seen fourth wall breaking jokes plenty of times in the Nostalgia Critic before, so it's really not anything new despite that the episode is treating it like a huge step for the series. And because the fourth wall breaking jokes here resort to addressing the audience directly, they come across as completely obvious and just too awkward to watch. And like I said, it's highly hypocritical. This is the second time that Doug has called out Deadpool cosplayers for being annoying, but the entire episode is like this. It's cashing in on the idea of doing stuff that Deadpool would do because they think it'll make them look cool and comedic. He's trying way too hard to make this work, and the tone is incredibly narcissistic. He actually thinks that by copying Deadpool's shtick for this episode that it makes it entertaining. It doesn't. It just shows him desperately trying to gain brownie points by imitating a nerdy gimmick, and poorly at that.
Holy shit! Deadpool! Like the actual Deadpool!
That's right, as close as our budget will allow.
Oh, how close?
Decent costume, clever writing, good-looking guy underneath.
Oh, okay. You know, on this trailer's got Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, wow, you're right. Well, why don't you use your clout with the crossover you did with them to get Reynolds?
Well,
I mean, the Deadpool on his trailer got over 20 million views. The one you did with them got, wow, almost 3.
I see your point.
I mean, with a connection that close, you surely must be able to work your charm and magic.
you have no idea the connections I have!
So let's get this podcast with sketches started. I assume you want to talk about my impact on R-rated comic book movies, box office growth, and groundbreaking fourth wall humor in the same sense. Well,
And this is why I don't regret saying anything that I said in my review of Doug's Norma the North episode. These drawn-out sketches are without question the absolute worst thing that was added to the series. Aside from being painfully unfunny, they're just grinding the pacing of the episode to an exhaustingly slow level. When you go to an episode of the Nostalgia Critic, you expect him to review a movie, right? But instead, they have to spend 3 minutes on this stupid opening sketch. Despite being only 3 minutes long, it feels so much longer because of how blatant and repetitive the humor is. What exactly was the novelty of these fucking things in the first place? I seriously want to know. Why did any single one of Doug Walker's fans ever find these charming or endearing or creative or witty? Because after 5 years of these stupid things, I'm completely sick of it. Everything about Doug's stupid sketches is a desperate plea for attention. Everyone is just dressed up in a cheap Halloween getup that doesn't even look remotely convincing. I've seen cosplayers from grade school who have put more effort into their costumes. They don't do anything with them except obnoxiously imitate scenes from the movie while irritatingly pointing out tropes and cliches, and their use of green screen doesn't even come close to looking integrated. In scenes where they have to run, it's painfully obvious that they're just running in place. The visual appeal is completely ugly with poorly drawn backgrounds and amateur special effects. Aside from that, nobody looks like they're blending into the background properly. All of the actors just look like they've been poorly photoshopped onto a screen cap or a picture. People have been saying that they're supposed to be intentionally crappy looking, which is an absolutely poor defense. This might have been justifiable back in the day when it was just him and a few of his buddies, where his resources were far more scarce and limited. But this is an episode from 2018, an era where they're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars simply by having people visiting their website. And that's not including all the ad revenue they make off of their YouTube channel. And furthermore, this is an episode that aired after that scummy Indiegogo campaign campaign where they asked their fans for $50,000 to upgrade their equipment. They gave them $90,000 and it still looks like it has the budget of a Nickelodeon sitcom. I don't care if they're supposed to be intentionally bad or whatever. If anything, they just emphasize how cheap and lazy the production of these newer episodes are.
Not so fast, dumb devil. You're the Lion King. Everybody's Kimba the White Lion.
Hey, where did Quantum Leap come from? Isn't he supposed to be white?
Apparently I wasn't PC enough, so I got a black Morty from another dimension.
I'm the woke version.
You're as woke as his style of comedy.
What the hell are you doing in my review?
You think you're this big groundbreaker, and you're not. There's other R-rated comic book hits, other R-rated comedy hits, and literally hundreds of fourth wall breakers before you. You're the Kanye West of gimmicks pretending not to be gimmicks.
Ooh, a Kanye joke. It's about time someone was brave enough to make fun of him.
And here's another running problem throughout the episode. The Deadpool Rick and Morty comparison argument. They try to commentate on this topic with more crappy jokes, and it ends up just becoming another gimmick that they painfully drag into the ground throughout the episode. Aside from that, this argument doesn't even make any sense. Even as someone who's only seen a couple of episodes of Rick and Morty, it's completely ludicrous that Doug actually believes that the two are comparable. There's a bunch of differences between the personalities of Deadpool and Rick, and the two characters use very different styles of humor. Rick is a nihilistic, unfeeling sociopath who tends to be envious and full of callous. His humor comes from his counter-arguments against the other characters and how he breaks down the insignificance of the world around him. While he is an anti-hero, he's not the same kind of anti-hero as Deadpool. He's a genius with a high intellect, but he's also a jerk who takes advantage of others, preferring to be teamed up with someone less smart than himself to feel superior. What helps to make Rick sympathetic is that he does recognize his problems, and he does find satisfaction in spending time with his family. Rick's main strength as a character is how he's used as an honest exploration of nihilism and existentialism, caring mostly for himself but still finding value in spending time with Morty. As for Deadpool, his humor comes from his cynical egotism and snarky attitude, constantly mocking the medium he inhabits. He takes almost nothing seriously, embracing how hyper-aware he is of himself. His awareness of his status as a superhero allows his pop culture references to be more fitting and grounded into his atmosphere. And he doesn't exactly acknowledge himself as a hero, fighting instead for the excitement and vengeance that comes with it. He's also much more morally gray and a lot more selfless than Rick. While he can be a stuck-up jerk and express lack of empathy in his acts of killing, he does acknowledge the importance of camaraderie, and he can think to fight for someone other than himself. There's also a fundamental bit of tragedy mixed into his character. He was dying of cancer, and the only cure for it was going through a bunch of torturous experiments that disfigured his skin. Since then, he's constantly experienced the negative side of his powers. He feels the pain he endures, and the trauma is shown to have strong effects on him. Despite having godlike healing powers and the ability to survive virtually anything, that can't be a pleasant experience. He uses his fourth wall breaks and self-awareness jokes as well as breaking the rules of reality to cope with his situation. The tragedy of his character was explored much more earnestly in the sequel, particularly during the Take On Me scene. It expresses how Deadpool isn't primarily a comedic character. He can also be a very emotional character with relatable and humble struggles, and how he uses his snarky personality to stay motivated. If Doug is choosing to use the movie version for this comparison, then this version of Deadpool is nothing like Rick. It's made very clear that Doug thinks Deadpool and Rick and Morty are comparable specifically because of how they're both R-rated comedies with fourth wall breaks. And that's not just my assumption, he literally announces it.
You think you're this big groundbreaker, and you're not. There's other R-rated comic book hits, other R-rated comedy hits, and literally hundreds of fourth wall breakers before you. You're the Kanye West of gimmicks pretending not to be gimmicks.
Ooh, a Kanye joke.
And by assuming that Deadpool and Rick and Morty are comparable simply because they both happen to be adult comedies with fourth wall breaks, Doug is demonstrating how he's completely misunderstanding both properties. Because of how faulty the subject is, it comes across as a straw man argument. It's a complete waste of time, and it doesn't even add anything to the analytical parts of the episode, how few there are. There isn't even much of a need for it. The argument of Deadpool not being original isn't a new argument. There were people discussing how Deadpool is unique amongst other fourth wall breakers years before this episode of NC came out. It wouldn't be so bad except that Doug is acting like he's the first person to be asking this question, like it's this unsolved mystery that no one else has worked on providing an answer to. They don't even make this part of the episode funny. The jokes they go for involve Rick mocking Deadpool for not being the first fourth wall breaking character and how his positive reception is undeserved for it. It all just amounts to Deadpool isn't original and really nothing else. The joke is just too one-dimensional to come across as funny, and it just keeps going and going and going until you completely lose interest to the point where you just skip to the end of the episode. There's simply no appeal to it. The acting just reeks of cringe, the voice acting is irritatingly bland, it's just Doug and some guys associated with Doug attempting to play characters from other works, which just comes across as lazy filler to make up for Doug's inability to write original and interesting characters of his own. Another long-time problem with these shitty sketches. And just when you think it can't possibly get any cringier, they resort to using those damn Rick and Morty memes that have just gotten old at this point. They don't do anything satirical or creative with it, they just say the meme.
To be fair, you have to have a high IQ to understand Rick and
And to think that he went on to mock John Cena a few weeks later. You see what I mean when I say that he's a hypocrite? This entire opening and many moments throughout the episode are just lame compilations of Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes, and talks about how Deadpool isn't original or unique. It completely overstays its welcome in this opening sketch alone, which makes all the times preceding it more and more painful to endure. It relies far too much on this one gimmick and it simply gets tiring.
Actually, why are you doing a review on him, Critic?
I admit, that's a good question. People have clearly moved on to complaining about Solo.
Oh, of course people have moved on to complain about Solo, because you know, it was such a box office hit.
It opens with Deadpool as an assassin for hire who...
Whoa, really blowing the budget on this one, aren't you?
What? It's a decent-looking city.
Yeah, I'm clearly on top of a building. All one of 3 dimensions are clearly being explored here.
Look, buddy.
I wonder how far this ball can go. What do you think? 4, 5 rooftops I can bounce it off of? Oh no! An invisible force field impenetrable to Bad King.
You have 2 years to make your movies. We have 2 weeks.
Yeah, if I could quote Spoonie from his Tekken movie review, just because you acknowledge your effects are cheap and amateur doesn't change the fact that your effects are cheap and amateur. Alright, allow me to clarify. Self-deprecation humor can work, but it has to be done properly. The self-mockery has to have an attractive appeal to it in order to succeed. And there needs to be the notion that you're not willing to take yourself too seriously. It also has to be done scarcely, because doing it too much shows weakness in your esteem. Other things that are required are a wide range of expression, and how much you're willing to distance yourself from the joke. You have to think about how you're going to exaggerate the negative comments used on you. Do it in a way that allows the audience to better relate to you. To put it simply, there's nothing attractive about Doug's self-deprecation jokes. All he does is say we know our effects are cheap, or I know my character is a pathetic man-child, and doesn't twist it into something clever. It's not nearly expressive enough in order to be effective given how one-note the mockery is. But what really prevents it from working is that he just takes himself far too seriously. As in, he treats his garbage like it's a genuine work of art. He really believes that he just makes such breathtakingly groundbreaking and revolutionary content, despite that he's done next to nothing to improve his craft. He quit Nostalgia Critic to move on to demo reel because of his ridiculous confidence in his abilities as a filmmaker, and that ended up blowing up in his face. And in this particular episode, the self-deprecation humor is way overused. They just amount to we have no budget or this is poorly done, and you're listening to them saying that for a good chunk of the episode. It lowers the value of the comedy they're going for, and it's perceived as annoying and embarrassing. Self-deprecation humor also works depending on how high your reputation is and how much power that you have because of it. It's done to bring down your status to the level of your target audience to better relate to them. And considering everything that's happened since last April, Doug's reputation isn't exactly in its best condition. Instead of reducing his status to the level of the average human being, he's just placing himself below the average human being, making his self-mockery less relatable and amusing to watch.
Yeah, everything's going so good and we're so happy and we can think of baby names. I'm gonna die.
What?
I am totally gonna die. No girlfriend is this happy in the beginning of a movie without dying.
First of all, leave the fourth wall breaking to me, because only I seem to be able to do that.
Okay.
You see what I mean when I say that the fourth wall breaking is shit when more than one character is doing it? It works because it's exclusive to Deadpool himself given the setup and background to his character. And when you have it being done by someone else, it makes the fourth wall breaking feel bland and foamed in. I already talked about this, so let's just move on.
You killed my only love. Now I'm gonna destroy you in the most horrific way possible.
And what are you going to do, Comrade Pizza Face?
To be fair, I probably could have put more thought into that.
Okay, given the mediocre way they imitate the scene, it shows how Doug completely missed the point of the truck scene. Deadpool didn't just push him in front of the truck. He hugged him and jumped in front of the truck with him. It was done to delve into Deadpool's character by showing how the loss of his love has left him broken and with nothing to live for. His plan was to die along with the gangster, but his powers keep him from dying. He becomes suicidal over the loss of Vanessa, but isn't even able to end it with his mutation bringing him back. That's part of the tragedy of Deadpool's character. He doesn't want to live anymore, but is forced to live on because of his powers. I know I'm getting into this one early, but this is probably the worst thing about the episode, especially if you haven't seen the movie. They're just making shitty jokes about the scenes they're copying while completely misrepresenting them, coming across as highly misinformative. It shows how they cared more about these shitty sketches and pushing out these shitty jokes than actually reviewing the film. If you want to make a sketch series, make a sketch series, not a review. And before you say Nostalgia Critic is just entertainment and nothing else...
Probably goes without saying that this film is just as bad as the first, but this is an analytical review series, so just saying "bite me, you clog of ginger pubic hair" probably isn't going to be enough.
And there you have it. The Nostalgia Critic is meant to be seen as an analytical series. Doug is the creator after all, so by his word, it's officially canon. So if he can take his own crap seriously, so can I.
The credits roll as they emphasize what a big deal it is that they killed off Deadpool's one and only true love from the last film.
Rick, am I a dumbass, or has that been done a lot?
Yes.
To which question?
Yes.
What are you talking about? We killed off the romantic lead. That's a big-ass deal.
Maybe 30 years ago, but especially for a comic book character, that's not particularly uncommon. You should replace those handjob credits you're giving yourself with all the other movie sequels that did the exact same thing.
And once again, they're misrepresenting the scene they're copying. It's not just that they acknowledge that they killed the love interest, they do it in a way to show how killing Vanessa was part of the joke. They know that killing the love interest is overdone, so they make an over-the-top big deal on it to make it humorous. This literally amounts to nothing more than just rehashing the not original argument again, and more shitty Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes.
You know, you seem to think these movies are only made for angry, awkward, overweight 14-year-old boys, and I give it more credit than that.
Yeah, give art a chance, Rick. Critic, tell us what happens next.
So Deadpool befriends an angry, awkward, overweight 14-year-old boy, and...
Really? You had to phrase it that way?
Oh, just get on with it!
Get it? Get it? It was something he said he wouldn't use to describe fans, but then immediately uses it to describe a character in the movie. Aside from this being just another poorly done self-deprecation joke, I don't find the wording offensive as much as it's just lazy. You can see the punchline coming from a mile away. The style that Doug uses just makes it too easy to predict the joke he's going for. And when comedy is predictable, it simply doesn't work.
They did terrible things to me in there, things that literally scarred me for life.
Note, we are aware this accent is terrible. Tamara's only exposure to New Zealand was an interview she saw with Peter Jackson about the Hobbit movies. We are sincerely sorry to all of New Zealand for this outrage, both the accent and the Hobbit movies.
So you can put together a half-assed apology to New Zealand for your crappy sketch, but can't make the time to apologize to all the people whose trust you broke or abused while working with Mike Mashad? I know this has nothing to do with the episode itself, but considering recent events, it just makes the joke come across in really poor taste.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you ever seen a Marvel movie? Like, any of them?
Yeah, it's basically a bunch of dramatic moments followed by jokes.
Hey, what do we say? I'm the only fourth wall breaker, remember?
Yeah, why is that?
So you can want to be me when you sneak into these films.
Is that manipulative or genius?
Yes.
To which one?
Yes.
Wow, it's actually kind of amazing. They know that the fourth wall breaking doesn't work if someone besides Deadpool is doing it, and yet they turn it into a running theme all throughout the episode.
I'm in the film now!
What the hell is this?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I used my portal gun to bring in other self-aware characters to emphasize how original you are. You want to break the fourth wall? I literally break it beyond!
Do I need to go back to my first argument on why this is bullshit again? We get it. Deadpool wasn't the first fourth wall breaker. And guess what? Neither was Freakazoid. The comparison he's making here doesn't even work because Deadpool was created long before Freakazoid was. This is just another example of how the sketches just go on and on and on. They needlessly take up so much time that could be spent on breaking down the movie, and it just comes across as pointless filler.
Right the hell out of nowhere, a character from a dystopian future sees his Kentucky Fried family and journeys back in time because Russell is the one who kills them. Now in the movie, this is just Roland playing Cable, but truth be told, we don't have anyone quite as awesome as that, so we went for the next best thing.
I am Cable Boner.
I take it I have to watch the show to know what this is.
He's a reoccurring character, yeah.
Oh cool, another crappy character being brought back specifically for fan service. Okay, so why is it that I don't like Devil Boner even though he's an original character created by Doug and not something from another work? Well, here's the thing. The character himself could work, except that he's being portrayed by Doug Walker, and my reasons for not liking that aren't exactly what you might think. Doug has played the Nostalgia Critic for so long that it's literally the only character that can possibly be associated with him. It's his entire trademark that he plays this screeching, immature, nitpicky movie reviewer, so taking him out of that comfort zone prevents him from fulfilling another role. Whenever you see Devil Boner, you're just seeing a watered-down clone of one of Doug's other characters. The voice acting just isn't convincing because of how impossible it is to differentiate the two. You're just hearing the Nostalgia Critic trying to sound like a metal singer or a biker gang member with a sore throat. Every time he's voicing or acting as someone besides Nostalgia Critic, you're just hearing Doug Walker putting on a crappy impression. There isn't enough enthusiasm or variety in the way he talks to fit the designs or personalities of these different characters.
Oh, God.
Sweet Jesus.
I don't know, Rick. Haven't you gone far enough with the fourth wall breakers?
Not until he sees what a gimmicky hack he is.
You're the heck, you little pop culture spewing pimp.
Oh, for fuck's sake, now he's just forcing it onto us. He didn't even do anything to interfere with the scene. He just makes a comment after Kermit gets ripped off. Constantly bringing up the topic of Deadpool versus Rick and Morty doesn't make it interesting commentary, it just makes it look pretentious.
Domino also survived using her luck, and they head off to save Russell in an exciting car chase.
Wait a minute, a car chase?
Yeah.
With this review's budget, you're gonna do a car chase?
Well, attempt to.
Screw it. If we're gonna do a car chase with no money, we're gonna do it my way.
A car chase with no money? Wow, considering that no one is willing to be your sponsor anymore, that's kind of sad in hindsight.
So Cable decides to join the team to see if they can talk Russell out of his evil ways.
In Soviet Russia, fourth wall breaks you.
You ever stop to think at this point that Doug Walker's entire career as the Nostalgia Critic is just one big midlife crisis? Because it's the only way that I can legitimately feel sorry for him at this point.
X-Force kills the shit out of the scientists that torture the young mutants right before teaching a young mutant that it's wrong to kill the scientists.
They didn't kill the scientists, they killed the guards.
Russell, I know you think revenge will make you feel better, especially because I've gotten revenge on like 1 million people, and by God, it felt great.
What is the moral of this movie again?
No idea.
The moral was admittedly done with some sarcasm given its comedic edge, but the message about moving on from tragedy and finding purpose was still there. And it was clearly shown to you during the Take On Me scene. It was the scene that showed where the movie's true strength lied. It expanded upon the part of Deadpool's character that people unfamiliar with the comics wouldn't know about. How he's a sad clown struggling to do the right things. Even knowing he obviously wasn't going to die, the way it was executed was very effective. Like a calm and comforting moment giving the audience a break from all the chaos.
But killing him won't fix anything. It'll just turn you into a supervillain. A supervillain with the name Russell. And that's just uncomfortably weird.
He did have a name besides Russell, you know. He called himself Fire Fist.
And let's go start X-Force. You in, Cable?
Well, I did dedicate my life to saving my family.
But they seem to be okay now.
That's true, and I suppose nothing bad can happen to him in an apocalyptic future. Sure, why not?
Cable chose to stay behind because he wanted to look for a way to prevent the apocalyptic future from happening in the first place. He doesn't just leave them to struggle in a dystopian setting because he's going to try and stop it.
So it turns out this was a family fiction. But Deadpool ends the film by stealing Cable's time-traveling device and saving Vanessa in the past.
You saved me, stopping everything from happening, including X-Force.
Did I, though? Did I?
I don't know. Did you?
No, he did not stop everything from happening. The only thing that was retconned was Vanessa's death. As we see in the mid-credit scene, the events of the X-Force being summoned to pursue Fire Fist still happened. And they still end up dying except for Peter, who Deadpool saves. Which would mean that everything else that happened still ended up happening. They still experience all that stuff, and even if Deadpool already knows what's gonna happen, he still has the memories of everything he went through, so the character development is still intact. That's like 4, possibly 5 times in a row they misrepresented scenes from the movie for the sake of a stupid joke. I don't know whether if Doug is just being ignorant, or if he didn't pay attention to the movie, or if he simply has the memory of a goldfish, but for him to call this a review of Deadpool 2 when he's misrepresenting events from the film this much, it kind of makes all of those upvotes a little bit more painful to look at.
You know I've had it up to here, Dr. Fine.
Doesn't matter how big you are, you're still Family Guy in a Spider-Man costume.
Comparing Deadpool to Family Guy is an insult, good sir. You know what? The episode is almost over. Let's just get to the end of it. So we have our obligatory summary at the end, which I guess is supposed to be the part where Doug justifies this being a review, despite that this was just a bunch of shitty Deadpool versus Rick and Morty jokes. And even with this crappy summary at the end, it still doesn't feel like a review because so much was left out. Doug doesn't delve nearly enough into the story and the characters, and even what we ended up getting isn't even something that can be considered a review. The whole thing is just a beat by beat of the scenes, and even then they were more about Rick and Morty comparisons than actually looking at the film or Deadpool as a character. They skipped over so many important scenes because they probably couldn't think of a joke to represent them. Not that the jokes that they ended up giving were funny either, but that's beside the point. Doug didn't touch upon how Deadpool was suicidal over the loss of Vanessa, or how he learned how to cope with the loss and found a new family in the X-Force, or his denial of caring about Russell adding conflict to the situation. He didn't even touch upon how Deadpool isn't just about the jokes, not delving into the tragic side of the character as the movie did. Even that brief touching upon the movie's tone shift felt half-assed. This ending summary just feels too rushed, and the insight that he gives is too surface level. And it finally ends with more obvious self-deprecation jokes, along with a few lines of dialogue that I simply found to be rich with irony.
You know, you guys are funny in media, but you're assholes in real life.
Just because a funny jerk on TV can get away with it doesn't mean you can get away.
And to think that I was willing to give you a chance to clean up your act, you sad little coward.
Hi. You might have noticed at the end of Deadpool 2 there was no after-credit sequence, wasting the time of millions of pissed-off fans.
Hey, guys, the episode is over. You can just skip over to the charity shout-out.
So, this one's for you.
This isn't that good.
Yeah, shawarma kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Was this supposed to be the lunch that cost $3,500 if you supported that shitty Indiegogo campaign? Well, at least it wasn't my money that was wasted. This was painful! I can't say for sure if this is the absolute worst episode of The Nostalgia Critic. I mean, there was at least some resemblance of an attempt to analyze the movie. They at least tried to give the sketches some purpose, granted they failed miserably, but I could at least understand the direction it was going. The green screen here isn't as bad as the one from Dragon Ball Evolution, or whatever the flying fuck this was supposed to be. But even when compared to other episodes that were released between 2016 and 2018, this failed spectacularly. After over 10 years of the same old shtick, The Nostalgia Critic has just grown painfully tiresome. Nobody looks even remotely excited to be in this episode, with plenty of stale acting and forced expressions. The writing is so boring, painfully uninspired, and just reeks of cringe. The lack of understanding Doug has of Deadpool's character, or why people like these movies at all, is so baffling, and it makes him look like an amateur. Except he's the fucking face of YouTube movie reviews, and he's supposed to be better than this. And not only does he misrepresent the Deadpool movies, but he also misrepresents Rick and Morty, which is an absolute disservice to the show and especially misinformative to people who haven't seen it. Even from the handful of episodes and clips that I've seen, I can tell you with sheer confidence that the show is absolutely nothing like how they were represented in Doug's shitty sketches. And isn't he breaking his promise to not review anything currently in theaters with this episode? You know, like he did for Wonder Woman, Ghostbusters 2016, Jurassic World, The Force Awakens, and so many others.
I won't review anything currently in theaters.
I guess he just couldn't resist sinking to a new low for that sweet, sweet money. You know, that "I remember it so you don't have to" line really doesn't work when you're reviewing a movie that just came out 2 weeks prior. And before anyone says that Deadpool fits the nostalgia portion of this show because the Deadpool comics started in the 90s, if a new Superman movie were to come out tomorrow, I could easily apply that exact same flawed logic to it. Given the desperation of his current situation, do you really think he reviewed Deadpool 2 because of its nostalgic connections? Are you really sure that it wasn't because he needed to make a video about a hot trending topic fake in order to gain extra views to make up for his reduced trafficking and to distract people from the change the channel situation. He didn't review this movie because of its nostalgia connections. He reviewed the movie for the same reason he did all of those currently in theater movie reviews with those shitty clipless sketches. To gain publicity and money. And after the change the channel situation, he's just doing whatever he thinks will gain him views and attention. Whether it's a hot topic movie or fan requested movies. Desperately trying to hold on to whatever he can after the fallout. I mean, he certainly didn't review Deadpool 2 because of his vast familiarity with the character, because if this review is anything to be believed, he really doesn't know enough about him. He even said so himself in his out of character review of the first movie.
What I know about Deadpool, which actually isn't much, every time I go to a con, there's like a million Deadpool, so I know he's a really popular character. I know he's aware he's a fictional character, so there's a lot of fourth wall jokes. I know he's like an action hero who can't lie, or kind of an anti-hero, and he does a lot of comedy because he knows he's a character, and he like can get shot and either doesn't feel the pain or heals up or something like that. Even then, I'm still not entirely sure. And he has a thing for chimichangas.
And for those of you who want to say he learned more about the character with the passage of time, this episode clearly shows that he obviously didn't. If Deadpool was a one-trick unicorn, as stated while wearing that shitty Rick cosplay, he wouldn't have made 2 hit movies back to back. What really makes his insight on Deadpool so terrible is that he clearly didn't do any research on the character. In the opening interlude, he didn't even discuss Deadpool's creator and how different writers would later add to his personality. I mean, he was willing to do it before. He binge-watched every single episode of The Last Airbender in preparation for Shyamalan's shitty movie adaptation. And you wanna know a little fun fact about the episode? Apparently on Wednesday it was uploaded on their YouTube channel exclusively, and it wasn't even on their website yet. You know, it's quite possible that they did this because they wanted to drive attention to their YouTube channel to get people to subscribe to them. I mean, seeing the episode on their website wouldn't have immediately added to their sub count, and if you want to think that I'm going crazy and just assuming this, somebody actually made a tweet about it, so I don't think that I'm the only one with this theory in mind. The most repetitive comment that I've gotten from Doug Walker's defenders by far is the old classical saying that it's just his opinion. And I should leave him alone because he's just trying to make people laugh while talking about movies. That's all he's doing. Doug Walker never hurt anyone.
The fact that Channel Awesome doesn't care about those victims. Because if you read, so I'm going back to this, why they saw it was a money pot. What they saw was, we're going to get sued for this sexual harassment thing. We're going to get sued because Jew Warrior shot himself in the head. We're going to get sued for all of this stuff, right? But the victims, do you realize they're also in a very tricky fucking position? Because if they come forward, but there's no, I mean, it's very difficult to prove things now, but if they come forward, his wife could sue them. Do you see? I don't understand why you guys are so fucking stupid. You guys were like hiding a fucking sexual predator? Why? Was he getting that many views? I didn't get them. And I also, I really despise the fact that my only ever crossover, like full-on crossover with any other producer, and I'm blaming all of you guys for being dicks, is no, I'm not, is with Justin. I have one fucking crossover, and it's with the goddamn suicidal rapist. Great. Good. That's good. That's really good for my PR.
If Doug is going to have an opinion on something, the very least that he can do is make sure that opinion is better thought out and closer to the facts. Because this episode was a masterpiece of failure. In this pathetic attempt to cash in on the Deadpool hype, he puts together a video that not only fails at giving interesting insight on the Deadpool movies, but also fails at being humorous. I know there's several more things in the episode that I didn't touch upon, but it's honestly moot points compared to everything else, and I honestly would have been wasting my time. Because even without those other scenes and moments that I didn't bring up, the problems with this episode are so easy to recognize. The comedy is stale and severely lacking in wit. The pacing is obnoxiously slow. The Rick and Morty scenes are beyond forced. The complete misunderstanding that Doug Walker has of both Deadpool and Rick and Morty is embarrassing. And it simply doesn't work as a review because he doesn't say anything interesting or insightful about the movie. There are other reviewers who have gone into far more detail about the quality of the Deadpool movies than Doug Walker could ever even even hope to. And the fact that he continues to care more about pushing this bullshit instead of addressing the situation and simply apologizing for his involvement makes this episode a little, no, scratch that, it makes this episode a lot more unclean and uncomfortable to sit through. But if there was one thing that I could take back in my review of his Norma the North episode, it would be this. I completely take back feeling sorry for Tamara and Malcolm because they no longer deserve it. If they're gonna back up Channel Awesome and continue to support Mike, Doug, and Rob after all the shit they've pulled, they're simply just as oblivious. God damn this show. Now I really need a break. As if reviewing The Last Jedi wasn't stressful enough. Thanks for watching, and please, for God's sake, stop doing this, people. Just stop doing it. It's really not a hill worth defending anymore. God, I need some time off. I'm gonna play some Kingdom Hearts for a while.